We are tearing out the part of the computer I just put together.
Somebody say something about something wildly irresponsible? There are surface mount components under the lid, which is why it's very important to pay attention to the arrow. I knew that, I forgot.
It's time to finally close the door on my 7980XE cooling saga. I know it's been a while. For most of 2019, I have remained silent about how my insane Trunks PC had been running ever since the rebuild. I showcased that rebuild in a video earlier this year, swapping to the Noctua NH-D15 cooler, my favorite cooler to date, the Epyc Be Quiet Dark Base 900 case, sticker bombed appropriately, and rigged up some more NVMe, and went on my way. But a certain problem reared its head back, as always. A problem I tried to ignore. A problem that I didn't want to believe that I needed to address again. But as spring rolled in, and temperatures in my office started rising again, it could no longer be ignored. So addressing this itch, this familiar issue, began with a familiar trek, back to the Level 1 Tech's headquarters. We had to go to the specialist. Hey, this whole light speed thing isn't going fast enough. Let's pick it up. We need ludicrous speed. That's better.
Well, before we get there, we need to hear from this video's sponsor.
The Mod Mic Wireless can boldly go where no mic has gone before. This microphone can attach to any headphones, requires no additional wires, features very low latency, a dual capsule microphone, 12-hour battery life, and LED indicators on the receiver so you know when you're muted and or when the battery is running low. And you can basically run your entire house without ever losing a signal. What more could you ask for? Learn more by clicking the link in the video description.
Oh God, what's going on?
Oh no! What are we doing?
We're here in the land of the Level 1. Lots of hardware to test and benchmark, and while I was there, we went ahead and benchmarked some sweet Radeon 7 versus GTX 1080 Ti goodness to see if that expanded memory cache feature helped with my issues of out of VRAM crashing in Resolve and Premiere. It did, a little bit, but I really started to learn that the Red Giant plugins are just a bit insane, or at least the Universe suite is, and not optimized for 4K timelines. But that's not why we were here. Let's rewind a sec.
Thanks for watching another unboxing brought to you by Demolisher. The camera's shaking. Let me see if I can stand it up. Thanks for watching another unboxing video brought to you by Demolisher.
Okay, not that far. Come on now. There we go. In case you are unfamiliar with our journey so far, my journey with the X299 platform has been a rough one. It's an amazing platform that allowed me to achieve some of my biggest content goals, and I'm grateful for my time with it. I originally received the Intel Core i9-7980XE within some spare parts sent to me by a glorious company supporter. I used a hobbled together rig to render out my full 5-hour OBS masterclass, the most insane timeline I've ever worked on. My current Zezima PC at the time with the 6900K and GTX 1080 just wasn't cutting it. The render kept throwing errors and I thought having better rendering hardware would fix my problem. So I pulled out one of the biggest favors to date and got my first experience with X299. Little did I know that my actual rendering problems were caused by the infamous Premiere GPU render error that still lives on today without any real solution, other than swapping to a Quadro or Titan driver stack, which not everybody can do. And this did not actually fix my problem. I wound up having to remove a lot of transitions, split the timeline into rendered chunks, and render out over 6 terabytes of intermediate cineform renders, and finally got a H.264 render ready to go and upload. Except it was too big. YouTube had, at that point, sometime halfway through 2017, reduced their max file size from 200-something gigabytes to just 128 gigabytes, and my normal 100 megabit per second H.264 bitrate at 5.5 hours long was just too much. So I had to re-export the file, which took a few more attempts to go through, at half the bitrate. But then we were ready to rock. 116 gigabytes, 5.5 hours, 4K, 60 FPS, ready to educate the masses. By January 2018, I had begun integrating this into a new PC build. I thought I'd finally go for the RGB tempered glass YouTuber nonsense instead of the silent black monolithic workstations that I normally build. I custom fit a USB-C front panel connector for my Atomos SSDs, soldered together some Gigabyte compatible RGB strips, custom cable mod cables. I was set. But that thing was an oven, and the gaming-oriented motherboard was bottlenecking me at every turn. It was a solid workhorse when I didn't demand too much throughput of it, but it had issues. Eventually, I bit the bullet and invested $500 into the Asus WS-X299 Sage motherboard. Man, workstation motherboards are glorious. This fixed a lot of my bandwidth limitations and really opened up what I wanted from the system, though I could no longer use half of the RGB. Sometime through here, I had overclocked my system. I get why it was that way, but Intel's Turbo Boost Max 3.0 only boosting the 2 fastest cores, and subsequently Windows' scheduler loading everything onto just those 2 threads, just really didn't feel like I was getting full use out of those insane 36 threads that I was promised. I was able to bump up the 7980XE to a very stable 4.4 GHz, and didn't look back for a long time. It performed great. My productivity skyrocketed by this literal doubling of performance, though I definitely had to knock down AVX2 and AVX512 to 3.2 and 2.8 GHz respectively. But that thing was an oven, as I said. It was constantly battling up against the 103 Celsius wall during benchmarks and renders, and my newfound use of FFmpeg during 2018 really started to make heat a serious concern with the AVX optimizations. Thus began my cooling adventure. I originally had a 240mm AIO with push-pull set up to cool this. It's what came with it. I figured it was fine. It was not all that quiet and it ran hot, so I did some digging. Next AIO that was topping benchmarks for the 7980XE was EVGA's CLC280 AIO. But due to putting it on the top because it wouldn't reach the front and creating a heat pocket under my desk, this performed worse and was louder than what I had before. Better pace, a 360mm AIO, I tried many solutions over many months. I discovered that my IHS was bubbled out and not flat. I kept getting feedback that all of this was just wasted effort without using liquid metal under my IHS, something that I refused to believe should be accepted as necessary for a consumer product, especially with the risks involved, and decided to compromise. This was meant to be a workstation platform, not an enthusiast overclocking platform, after all. And that's what I wanted it for.
So this is the part where the Intel engineer would tell you that, oh no, there's a slight convex or a slight concave, depending on which side of the processor you're looking at, on purpose because blah, blah, blah. This is a 7900X. Turns out the 7900X was actually a terrible buy because, a year later there was the 9900, or 9700 or whatever, but HEDT, but then the 9900K, which in terms of performance is way better and also like half the price. So the 7900X was a terrible, terrible deal. I'm sorry if you bought it. We're gonna delid it.
Eventually, I rebuilt the entire rig, optimized for airflow and tackling my existing bottlenecks, upgraded from 128GB of RAM, thanks to Crucial, which actually made a huge difference in some of my workflows, and swapped to my favorite cooler that I've used for the past 5 years, and should have started with in the first place, Noctua's NH-D15, well, specifically the D15S, due to clearance issues on this platform. This thing, and its D14 predecessor, was the only cooler that could tame my AMD FX 9590 back in 2014, and I was trusting it here. Ah, silence. Much better. But heat was still a problem. After hours of failed attempts at fine-tuning my overclock in a way that didn't melt this poor piece of silicon, and I am a fairly big noob at overclocking, though I've learned quite a bit through this experience, I settled on reducing my clock speeds to 3.2 GHz on all cores. Still a decent boost speed, but obviously a significant drop, and 3.0 and 2.8 GHz for AVX2 and AVX512, respectively. I should have been content here, but even with such a drastically reduced overclock, even with it being the most stable overclock of my life, something that I don't feel people give X299 enough credit for, as even if it melted itself, the overclocking on X299 was fairly stable on most chips. This thing was still running quite toasty. I let a few more months go by, getting a lot of work done of course, before I realized that I was still unsatisfied. And that's how we got here. I finally gave in. I was ready to lap the IHS, maybe delid it even. We didn't have liquid metal, and that was not a road I was willing to go down, but I thought we could address most of the problem. Surely I just needed a little adjustment, right? Everyone said the built-in thermal compound was crap, and even just replacing it was better, right? As usual, I was self-conscious that I didn't use enough thermal compound when installing the D15 last time. There was enough. Prior to agreeing to delid, I did go ahead and try the CPU with some of these ThermalRight TY143 fans that Pablo, who has lent many things for me to cover on the channel over the years, sent over. They get up to a massive 2500 RPM, but can go low and were a perfect physical fit for the Noctua NHD15. So the idea was to set an aggressive fan curve so they would be fine under normal load, and then I would just have to tolerate some added noise when rendering. But oh boy, they were intolerably loud and didn't actually make any performance difference. The thermal conductivity of the IHS was a bottleneck. Time to delid and lap.
So what are we doing today?
We
I
are
love the delidder thing.
we are tearing out the heart of the computer I just put together.
It's a 79.
80XE.
Well, no, I mean, like, just like different. It's like 7980XE. It's got a heat problem.
It's an oven. It's an oven, even with the best cooler you can pretty much put on it. And it's bowed out completely in the center. So I'm pretty, like, I've done everything I can to optimize airflow and cooling and stuff like that without cracking it open. And it's still not enough. So we're breaking open a $2,000 processor.
Somebody say something about something wildly irresponsible? Yep. Yeah. Oh no.
Mistakes were made. It's not conductive though, so.
Oh, good. I thought you'd use the liquid metal stuff.
Oh, no. I failed.
Now, before we do terrible things to the 7900X or the 7980XE, I've got this. This is an i5. An i5. The only i5 ever made for the X299 socket. It's 4 measly cores. It's not even got all the PCI Express lanes. This is terrible. This is a terrible, terrible mistake that Intel made. And I've got proof of their mistake right here, and I'm putting that on the line before the crappy $1,000 processor and the relatively okay $1,800 processor. I'm putting the i5 on the line because we need practice. We need cannon fodder, really. This is the infantryman of the processor delidding experiment. Intel wouldn't have done something perverse like solder the i5, would they? They wouldn't have done that, right?
Honestly, that would be amazing if they did. That's a tiny ass die.
Wow, look what garbage. Garbage, literal garbage. And look how thick this thing is.
Yeah.
It's a thick THICC. Definitely makes a very terrifying click every time.
It's not a sound I ever want a computer part to make.
I've made it make that noise without letting the magic smoke out. Well, you can really tell that this thermal paste really isn't the best.
None of it's on the huh. Is it rock hard?
Yeah, it's not. It's lost its. I actually put it in backwards.
Oh. There's the front one.
Yeah, and I knew not to do that.
Oh.
I've ruined it.
Did something break?
Yep.
That one that's like floating out on its own.
Yep, there's actually quite a few of them. No. The good news is those are capacitors, and it's probably fine.
Well, our delidding test did not go quite as expected, but thankfully that was just the trial run. Let's do mine now. I was super nervous at this point and almost willing to accept the death of my i9 if it meant an end to this struggle. Maybe it was for the best.
So it turns out that X299 is dead, I think.
Mine's dead. Aha! Success. Just kidding. It worked. Here's the thing. Delidding was only half the battle. There's still the problem of the completely uneven heat spreader. So Wendell took me down to his basement, the lair of a madman with too much hardware and dark tools below the surface. And with the lapping stone that I brought, it was time to get lapping. And lapping. And lapping. And lapping. And it was only halfway through that we realized that maybe we should have been using water with this, but there's no turning back now.
Things are a bit scary down in ye olde basement, but this is where we're going to make lots of copper dust, or nickel plating and copper dust.
More lapping.
So basically, the first thing that we do is load up this thing in the mill. Not because we're going to mill it, although that would be fun, but because the bed on the mill is pretty well tuned. We use a thing called a dial micrometer to actually see how not flat the top is. Now, I know that there are Intel engineers that are going to tell you, it's that way on purpose. But for our purposes, we don't want it that way. So we're going to fix it. We're going to change it. The dial micrometer shows us that we're about 5 to 7 thousandths of an inch out of flat, which, well, 5 to 7, yeah, I guess it's inch. Some of my stuff's set up for metric, so don't quote me on that. But basically all you do is just patience. Patience is the key here. So we're going to use a lapping stone. We're going to use the rough side to take away a lot of material, and then we're going to try to polish it to a smooth mirror finish on the copper side. Well, we're getting rid of the nickel finish, and it's going to be copper, but the copper is going to oxidize, which is why they put the nickel finish on it. But if we cover it in thermal paste, it'll probably be fine. Probably.
And lapping. And lapping. Forget the gym, I just need to spend my days lapping CPUs in a basement to get ripped. On the other side of the basement, Wendell uncovered an ancient relic that truly made my day. But more on that in another video. Meanwhile, upstairs, Wendell got to work fixing the busted CPU.
By the way, in case you forget, there are surface mount components under the lid, which is why it's very important to pay attention to the arrow. I knew that, but I forgot, because X299 is an obsolete platform, which is the only reason we're doing this. can't believe that I've never soldered 0302 surface mount components before and had it work, so.
With great success. That's why we call him the specialist, after all. Eventually, my feeble arms could not take clapping anymore, and I called it quits. The IHS was shiny, smooth, flat, and all coppery. It was time to test it. A few test fits with some smooth thermal compound spreading on the die and the shiny IHS ready to go, it was time to start benchmarking again. I actually hit a new high score in Cinebench for me, under the original 4.4 GHz overclock that I had before, and I was feeling great. Under FFmpeg though, it was still getting a little toasty.
So this is a good sign. If I can get Cinebench to run and not be TJ Maxx of 105, 106, I'll be happy. I won't even try to push it anymore. Like, it's staying under 80, mostly around 65 to 75 for, again, the hardest like kind of load. This is just CPU though. This isn't GPU.
What's the conclusion about Intel thermal paste?
Take it out. It was so bad. We put a little bit of MX4 in there. Good stuff. Scraped out the hardened rock clay cement that was on the die and flattened. I did notice when I installed my Noctua cooler that I had so much trouble. I even noted when I was doing my live streams trying to figure all this out, I had so much trouble getting even pressure on the cooler to install it. And once we did this, it could just be coincidence, but like it was so much easier to keep it even and pressure. Like it's like I could tell it was flatter. So I'm pretty stoked. Core 9's at 90, but that's after 4 minutes now. That's okay. So I came to Windows today with one goal: to save my computer. And I brought some new fans. We were gonna delid it, lap it. I was gonna change some airflow, and it took a very long time. But we learned some stuff along the way. Confirmed some stuff. Intel's included thermal compound in the IHS is just awful. Lapping a CPU cooler IHS does wonders for actually attaching an air cooler, because it went from me taking 20 minutes on stream to balance the Noctua fan, since it only has 2 mounting points, and just wiggling it back and forth to get it evenly pressured, to no time at all. And actually cleaning off your surfaces as far as your die and your IHS goes makes a world of difference. The first time we hooked this up and went to test this, it was still not running super great, and I had some big old fans on there that were way louder. I went back to the normal fans I had for my Noctua cooler. We cleaned it up a bit. I'm staying under 80 Celsius on the Intel burn test. We ran Cinebench and I jumped to 200 points after already hitting a fairly high record for myself with my i9. We're at 4266 now, which is pretty bonkers. It's nowhere near as loud. It kicks up a little bit there, but it's not. That thing, the other fans sounded like a jet engine. And even running FFmpeg full AVX12 6-minute video encode, highest core I saw was 92, and that was one of them. And for the most part, it was like 85 at the most, like sustained temperature. We may have saved Intel for now. I may not have to jump ship just yet.
We got the delidding tools. Well, we'll talk about this in a minute. I've also got the delid die guard X299, which maybe would let us use one of these X299 processors without the IHS, which I'm really tempted to do. But one of our benefactors of level 1, Daz, let me borrow the delidding tool that we used today. So we delidded 3 processors in all. A 7900X, which mistakes were made. And also the KB Lake i5. Remember these? Remember they made the 4-core for X299? I don't know what Intel was thinking, but yeah, I did. Look at that. It's like it's just so tiny, because it's not quad channel memory. It's got 16 PCI Express lanes, so there's not really a lot here.
Only 4 cores.
Let's get the biggest. I mean, it's solid nickel. Yours, at least, it was like hollowed out.
Oh, that's so much heavier.
Yeah.
Wow. Good paperweight.
This processor's for real. Narrator, it was not for real.
Always putting stuff in backwards.
Yes. So we were working earlier, and if you're not paying attention, it's real easy to accidentally install the processor backwards in the delidding tool, because there's a little microprocessor in the corner, and if you're not paying attention, it's like, oh, that's the mark for the corner. It's like, no, that's the RFID chip that they use for inventory. And so if you delid it the wrong way, it will rip off surface mount capacitors. That's what I did on the 7900X. But fortunately, I have a microscope and a hot air rework station.
And a lot of patience.
Yeah, it took like an hour and a half to resolder 6 tiny surface mount components. I couldn't get the solder to melt at first, but then I got that going, and basically it was okay. The components were so small that they would blow away. That was a problem, and it wouldn't post until we fixed it. So, but with the post, the temperatures are dramatically way better. I can hit 5 gigahertz, although it's not perfectly stable. But 4.8, 4.9 does actually seem stable now, and I could not hit 4.5 before on this 10 core. So I'm actually really happy with that result.
And I didn't mention, I'm running at 4.4 all-core on the 7980XE, and then since I do a lot of video encoding, the AVX offset is -10 for AVX 512 and -8, I believe, for the normal AVX. So about 3.4 to 3.6 gigahertz, which is still really good for that. So got some good speed out of it.
Neat. This has been an adventure. I never thought I would bother delidding a CPU, but now that the 7000 series have entered the garbage tier of their lifetime. Oh, there's some people laughing in Core 2 Duo in the audience. I'm so sorry.
I took it back home, accepted my fate, thought I would be fine working on this, but it did not take long once I was home to decide that these results were just not good enough. I wasn't willing to liquid metal the CPU, but I was willing to do one better. I picked up the Durbauer direct die mounting kit off of eBay, and Corsair was kind enough to send over their awesome H115i Pro RGB 280mm AIO cooler. This, mounted to the front of my case, direct die mounted, should be all the cooling capacity anyone really needs for a CPU. But, now approaching the end of 2019, it is not. Running at 3 GHz, my CPU is idling at 67 degrees Celsius. Under load, it kicks up to around 85 C. This is of course better than the 103 C I had before, but it's not okay. And in fact, I can still push it there if I wanted to. Trying to go towards the 4.4 GHz OC range just brings the similar 103 C results. The coolant idles around 44 C and doesn't really get that much hotter under load. There just isn't enough thermal transfer off of the die. I am a noob at overclocking. I could fine-tune voltages a bit to mitigate a small percentage of this, but even following all the guides I could find, it's just not happening. This brings us to our conclusion, and my journey's end with the X299 build, my Intel Core i9-7980XE CPU. It's been an amazing CPU, in many ways. The 36 threads of rendering power and quad-channel memory have allowed me to keep scaling the ridiculousness of my video production, and to keep going in 4K, 4K 60, and even sometimes 8K. It meets the needs in my 4.6K cinema camera's files, and for a while the 44 PCIe lanes were enough. Though now even those are a massive bottleneck for what I want. Soon, I will be leaving this platform. My plans will be shown soon enough, but I'll give you a hint. It will be a build of epic proportions. I know I've been quiet. I know people have wondered how the Ryzen 3000 and upcoming Threadripper launches have affected my perspectives. X299 was a really awesome platform at launch, and if you're fine not overclocking too heavily, it can still be a great workhorse. But I do think they need to lower the price, and I do think it's time for me to move on, for now. Until next time, I'm EposVox. Playlists with all the previous videos are linked in the description. Subscribe on Floatplane for early access and behind the scenes content.
Bye!